Imagine going from a minimum wage job to a software engineer in 9 months, trading your frying pan or maybe a cash register for a computer and a keyboard, trading dual work for problem solving, and some might say the most enticing of all, trading your $10 an hour for $50K to $100K salary. That is the dream coding boot camps are selling. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at one called Lambda School and seeing if they actually live up to this goal that they are promising. Now, there's a few things that make Lambda School unique. One of the first ones is, while it's located in Silicon Valley, all of the classes are online, so it is totally remote. And from the GIF that they have on their landing page, it looks like it is over Zoom, and you actually can see the faces of the other members or the other students that are learning with you. Secondly, they are funded by venture capitalists. Here are some of them. And the reason why I mention this is a lot of companies that are VC funded prioritize growth, and sometimes that is to their own doom. Third, they have an alternate way to pay for the boot camp called income share agreements, or ISAs. And how they work is you get to do the boot camp for quote unquote free, and then afterwards you pay 17% of your salary for 24 months. Once you start making more than $50K a year. Now, it's good to note on this, it is capped at $30K. That is the most you'll ever pay to Lambda School. There is two cool things about this ISA, or at least that make it more appealing than, say, a regular loan. The first is there is no interest on it, and secondly, you don't pay anything if you don't actually get a job after going through the boot camp. Now, with that said, it may not technically be a loan, but it is, in all intents and purposes, a loan just with a little bit different of conditions. You are still having to borrow or have someone else pay for your admission up front, and then later you're required to pay it back. So the question arises for the students that are doing the ISA contract where they're not paying up front, how is Lambda School financing itself, and how is it able to grow when there's such a long window between when they actually get paid? Because the program is 9 months, and then a student may not get a job for a couple more months, and then after that, they don't pay Lambda School $30K. They then pay Lambda School $30K over 24 months. So it's a very long period of time before Lambda School actually gets money in their pocket with that traditional way. So I'm sure this is not the only way, but one of the ways they finance this is through selling the ISA contracts so that they actually do get money up front. And so one such platform that it looks like they are doing this with, or we're planning to do this with, is with this one called Edly. And you can see this is a tweet where they announced the partnership with Lambda School. Now, I don't know all the details about how selling ISA contracts actually works, but you don't need to know all that to get a gist of how they function. So Lambda School expects to get upwards of $30,000 for a student who goes through their program and actually gets a job. Now, to get an idea of how much an average or random student is worth to the company, all you do is you multiply the 30,000 times the percent that they're likely to actually make it through the entire thing. And so that is, let's say, 50%. So we're saying right here 50% of them actually are going to actually complete the program and get a job that is $50K, and then actually pay Lambda School. So given a random student, Lambda School expects to earn $15,000. So when Lambda School sells an ISA contract, the person they are selling it to, on average, expects to get $15,000 per contract that they are sold. Now, the thing about this is they don't get this money up front. It takes some time and there's some risk involved in it. So what will end up happening is they'll take an extra percentage. So it may be only like 30% of the initial $30K Lambda will see. So Lambda may be selling their ISA contract that's worth $15K on average, and they may only see about $10K of that back, and that's the price that they are paying for getting this money up front. So in response to Lambda School selling ISA contracts, I've seen this argument pop up that Lambda School's incentives are no longer aligned with students because they have sold the contract, and so then they don't care whether the student gets a job or not. But I don't really agree with this. As we saw over here, it's really a numbers game. If Lambda School has a very high percent that are going through the program and that are getting a job, they're going to be able to sell these contracts for more. So while I do think it is a little sketchy to sell ISA contracts, I still think Lambda School is incentivized to get as many students as they can through the program and to actually land a job that is more than $50,000. Though funny enough, it looks like the partnership between Edley and Lambda looks like it is possibly dissolved. If you Google Edley Lambda School and you click on the top link, it now goes to a nothing has been found page. But if we go back to Google, there's this lovely little caret that we can click on, and it'll take us to a cached version of the page. And here we can see a Lambda School offering and basically the terms of how the ISAs would work if you wanted to invest in it. So there's been some speculation that the reason this was taken down was because of a recent article that was written about Lambda School that had a lot of negative things to say about it. And so people went and complained to Edley, and Edley took them off of their platform. But there's been no official word from either company, so it's hard to say whether this is just something they're delaying or if they're canceling the deal. Really hard to say. So this is the article that had several negative things to say about Lambda School. It's written by The Verge, and I want to go through a couple of their key points. So one of the first things they talk about is a story about a couple students, and the first one they talk about is Cerber. And so she said that the instructors changed week to week and often seemed to have no idea what the students had already covered. The curriculum advertised on the website never fully materialized. The online portal where they were supposed to find their homework assignments rarely matched up with what they were learning. And just overall from reading it, it seems that Lambda School just was disorganized and didn't have their stuff together. The article goes on to show us several other scenarios where Lambda just looks pretty sloppy with how they handled things, and it seems like Lambda was still trying to figure out how things were working. And it turns out all of these students that were kind of showing this or telling their story came from this UX program. And it says 3 months later, the interim UX program manager announced they were pausing the enrollment in the UX program so they could improve the curriculum. So it looks like the UX program is just a new program from Lambda. They were beta testing it and it didn't really work out that well. Now, there might have been some kind of miscommunication between the Lambda School and the expectations of the students, because maybe the students didn't realize how beta this was, because this is kind of expected to happen. If Lambda School is testing their UX program and this is only the third or first cohort, then yeah, there's going to be some bumps along the way for sure. I can't say that this is shocking to me at all. Though I did want to address one criticism that I saw come up in several different places from this article, and it came from this quote. It said, Nishida was also frustrated that many of the assignments seemed to come from free training materials. When people complain about being taught from free materials, I'm not exactly sure what they want instead. Like, would you rather have a book that was published in 2015 that you have to pay $100 for? Because that is the alternative that is happening in colleges. And I'll tell you what, it absolutely sucks. And maybe it's because some people don't realize what coding boot camps actually bring to the table, or schools in general. I don't think it is, handcrafted, beautiful curriculum. I don't think that's it at all. Hopefully they do have some good curriculum. But really what I think the benefits are to going to a school like this is being around, one, a group of students and peers that are learning this stuff with you, because it is very hard to learn to code. And so having basically a support system and also having people that you can learn from is super helpful, because not a lot of people can just lock themselves in a room and learn something. Talking to other people and going through the process is very helpful. And then secondly, having a teacher that is hopefully competent, that is very important, because you can ask them questions and get help from there. Unfortunately, not all teachers are good, and if you get a bad one, that can really ruin your experience. So this came from a Web 20 student, and this is the web developer track, I believe. And they said once a student asked about the difference between JavaScript array methods like push versus concat or for each versus map. The team lead said they were interchangeable. They are not. So this is something which you really do want your teacher to know the difference between, so they can actually explain these things, because there are times when these come up, and there's subtle differences between them. And maybe the free online material you're using does not give you a good explanation. And that's where the teacher can kind of fill the gap in and teach you kind of the difference between the two. But what's important to note here is it said the team lead, not the teacher. Basically, it looks like Lambda School pays some of the better students, or the students that are picking up the material faster, $13 an hour to be quote unquote team leads. And so that's where they, I guess, answer questions and have discussions with smaller groups of students. And this I find less of a big deal. It looks like a student is the one that said that. And yeah, students are going to say a lot of wrong things when they're learning still. But with that said, if you could only ask the team lead and you weren't allowed to, say, ask your instructors questions like that, then yeah, I think that's a problem. You should be able to talk to your instructors and ask them stuff like that. Another quote from a Web 20 student says here, Lambda is pushing students through who should not be continuing. I would have teammates who could not code really basic things. I've seen this firsthand, not at Lambda School, but at college. After completing programming classes, there are students that cannot really do anything with that knowledge whatsoever, or really they just never picked up the knowledge. They could pass the class, but if you actually ask them to do something or code something, they just have no idea where to begin. Sometimes the school or the teacher is to blame, but sometimes the student is also just not cut out to do programming, and there's not a lot the teacher or the school can do to fix that. Another interesting piece from this article is where they hired a iOS expert to look at the curriculum for Lambda School and just give it a review. And one of the quotes from that, he says, after looking through Lambda School's curriculum, I'd say students are going to struggle with very basic questions you'll get on first phone screens. Now, it would have been nice to actually know what things he thought would be an improvement on the curriculum or what things he thought was missing, but I could definitely see this being the case. Now, I don't have any experience with iOS, so I can't really judge for myself the material, but I looked at the full stack web development curriculum, at least this little overview that they have on their landing page here, and it looks pretty good to me. I think this is a pretty solid foundation, and they cover, I would say, most of the things you would need to get a junior web developer role. So Sandofsky is the iOS expert, and it looks like he also looked at some of the code on GitHub that some of the Lambda students wrote, and it looks like their code is pretty crap. And it looks like they also didn't get any feedback when they wrote their code. So the instructor just let them write bad code and did not help them on it or give them feedback on what they could improve, which is pretty sad. This is a pretty wild screenshot from the Slack of Lambda School. So one of the students said, I hope this is the right place as everywhere else doesn't seem right. I am extremely nervous about my Lambda School experience so far. Right now I have no idea how I'm going to make all of these past 10-ish plus months get me a job. I do not have anything of worth for portfolio pieces, and I have no clue how to even make a resume to reflect anything. This is causing a huge depressive down spiral, and on top of that, the walls are closing in fast, as I need a new place to live soon with dwindling funds. I'd like to have been hopeful that at some point in the computer science that I'd be hireable, but that does not seem to be possible. And then the CEO responds, that's Austin. He says, it's all part of the process. Trust the process. Yeah, this is a pretty crazy response from the CEO here. All he says is trust the process when obviously the process doesn't seem to be working for this particular person, and they are kind of looking for some extra help, and he's kind of not giving anything here. Now, I also find this very hard to believe that this was the entire exchange. This is a very good image to put in an article, and it'll just show how nasty Lambda School is. But we're not able to see the full context. There may be something in the replies that we're missing. There may be down more in the thread. Also, this may be a conversation that they've had with this person before. It's really hard to say. This looks like a really bad response, but without more context, I'm really leery about just throwing the CEO under the bus here. After reading that article, it can seem like Lambda School is just complete crap, and I kind of want to try putting it in perspective. If we ignore the UX cohort that just straight up got canceled, we could write this same article about any other coding boot camp or any other school. Each school is going to have some terrible professor or teacher. Each school is going to have some curriculum that could be tweaked or improved. And each school is going to have some students that fall behind or are just straight up not cut out for what the school is teaching. Coding specifically is very hard, and there's going to be some students that just can't keep up. And on top of that, because of the nature of coding boot camps, where let's say they have 9 months to go through the entire program, they were cramming in a ton of information in a very short period of time. And I think for sure they were losing a bunch of candidates which, given a slower pace of learning or a less intense pace of learning, could have actually became software engineers. But because they had such a short period of time where they had to learn everything, maybe they just weren't cut out for that and it didn't work out for them. And they fell behind and ended up either having to drop out or they didn't end up getting a job because they couldn't learn everything. 9 months is just not a lot of time at all, especially for what they're trying to teach. And I'm not saying this because I think it's okay for Lambda School to have these problems, but I do think part of it is kind of the nature of schooling. And each student is going to have a very different experience. I 100% believe the stories of the students that had a terrible time at Lambda School. But I also think there are some students that had an amazing time at Lambda School and probably just straight up changed their life. I guess my main point with this here is Lambda School is probably not as bad as the Verge article makes it out to be. And Lambda School is probably not as good as their marketing page makes it out to be. It's probably somewhere in the middle. But where I start to lose faith in Lambda School is when they start misleading their students. This was an article that was just written about Lambda School and exposes several places where Lambda School was not telling the whole truth. So for a little while, Lambda School was saying 86% of Lambda School graduates are hired within 6 months and make over $50,000 a year. But then a investment memo was found, and in there it says, hey, actually, we're at roughly 50% placement for cohorts that are 6 months graduated. So 86% is very different than 50%. And it turns out Lambda School got that 86% by only reporting statistics for the first 71 graduates of the program. And then Lambda's former director of career readiness, Sabrina Baez, told that placing Lambda's first batch of students was extremely difficult, largely owing to how underdeveloped the curriculum was at the time. I would say out of that 71 students, within 6 months of them graduating, it was probably a 50 to 60% placement rate. And added that Allred, which is the CEO, sometimes exaggerated student placement progress on Twitter. This is a yikes from me. This is one of the very important statistics that people are going to look at when they're trying to make a decision on whether to go to Lambda School. So it's very not cool to see them play with the numbers like this. I'd like to see them put the 50 to 60% placement rate on their website or on their landing page. Coding is a very hard thing. It's very hard to teach someone to be good at it, to actually become a software engineer. So I don't even think 50 to 60% is that bad of a rate, especially because Lambda School is so new. And also this is something where they can iterate and improve the percent over time. And I'd much rather them be honest about it than play number games and make it look better than it actually is. So this is another scenario where it looks like the CEO is just straight up lying. So he tweeted, "We never ever get paid upfront for ISAs." But then it looks like the author of this article actually reached out to some of the investors of Lambda School or some investors they previously worked with, and they got this quote, or they got this from it. And it says, "Private communications to his investors, however, confirmed that Allred's claim is entirely untrue. These documents show that as recently as August 2018, a hedge fund paid $10,000 to purchase half of Lambda School's ISAs." I don't know what to think of this. I don't know if the CEO just straight up didn't know this happened, or maybe he didn't consider this upfront payment, or if he's just straight up lying here. It's really hard to tell, but it doesn't have a good look to it at all and makes me very skeptical of Lambda School. So in conclusion, I would be very careful before you sign up for Lambda School. It does look like it has helped some students and has gotten them jobs, which is really great, but it also looks like there is some pretty sketchy stuff going on with it. And I'd really like to see a rebuttal from the CEO of Lambda School on some of the claims that these articles are making, because without it, Lambda School's not looking too good right now.